Okay, so today we're going to talk about deep mulch gardening, where it came from, the pros and cons, and how we like it here on the farm. So first I'd like to mention deep mulch gardening was invented by a lady named Ruth Stout, and she utilized any type of mulch that she could get her hands on, typically hay, straw, wood chips, as you can see here. And the concept is to constantly keep the ground covered. And keeping the ground covered is great for building organic matter, soil biology, building soil health. It really helps improve the overall performance of the soil, keeping it covered with a mulch system. And as the mulch breaks down, not only does it provide habitat for microbiology, but then it also adds organic matter back to your soil. The other thing that Ruth Stout liked about the deep mulch garden system was weed suppression. If you keep the ground covered with a constant layer of deep mulch, it's really hard for the weed seeds to pop up through that. If you leave it undisturbed and you're constantly just layering and layering and layering carbonaceous material on there, weed seeds basically are non-existent. Ruth Stout typically would use straw or hay, and just because that was what was available to her. And I would suggest you using what is available to you. You know, it could be lawn clippings, it could be leaves. We got a lot of these wood chips for free, just contacting local arborists and tree services, giving them a place to dump those wood chips, and using that as a carbonaceous material to keep the ground covered. And to get right into the pros, weed suppression is number one. If weeds pop up through there, we just weed it and then we toss it in the row. So it's constantly adding, and then they just die back, and you can see a little bit of green in this row here, but most of it's just brown, and it adds to the mulch layer. So weed suppression is probably number one. I would say a close second is probably water retention. You can get right, scrape those wood chips off, just barely break the surface, and there's constant moisture right there for those plants to root into. We hardly irrigate this section at all. We've had tremendous amounts of rain the past week or two here, and we're actually kind of concerned that there's a little bit too much moisture in here. I did lose a little bit of carrots over here, right there, but that was it. And it was only like 6 plants that were in a dipped area, and I'll know once these carrots are pulled out that I just need to add a little bit more compost in there and build that section up. So being mindful and watching those sort of things is key. You've got to be in your garden, every day. If not every day, every other day. You've got to be out here to notice those sort of things so you can potentially mitigate any loss. And yeah, that's about it. Another bonus of the deep mulch garden system is that it looks awesome. This is really eye appealing, and it looks great. I like the just looking out at a nice, clean, organized garden with nice straight rows and nice clean walkways. That it doesn't look like a traditional agricultural scene. That's just, to me, that looks great, and that's worth something as well. We don't really fertilize a whole awful lot here on the farm because the system here, it's kind of a closed loop. We're constantly processing carbon material that's just building soil, and then that organic matter is then digested through or via the microbes in the soil, earthworms in the soil as well, and then that kind of helps fertilize all of these plants. I did foliar spray with some fish, but look at that row of carrots. That is just thriving. That is an awesome row of carrots right there. And I can't really speak highly enough of the deep mulch garden system. You just really have to be mindful of your location and take these things into account, and be out in your garden every day. All right, so the cons. Like I had just mentioned, you know, it's a blessing and a curse having that much water retention within those beds and those rows. You're walking a fine line that could go bad real quickly. If you're getting constant rains, I would suggest maybe utilizing something like leaves, something that has a little bit less mass to it, that doesn't hold as much moisture. Um, you know, you take the good with the bad, but I would say a con would be if it really rains and you're in a heavy rain situation, I would not suggest wood chips as your deep mulch. And you really want to be mindful to actually leave the compost, the beds exposed there for your seed bed, and to not cover those with wood chips, as to not totally flood out and just ruin your beds. All right, so how does deep mulch gardening work for us here on the farm? Well, I would say overall we love it. You know, the weed suppression's great, the water retention's been great. I will say though that, you know, during those heavy rains we were extremely concerned. We had some flooding in the high tunnel and we had some pooling up here that did get to some plants, and that is what it is. We were able to get out here the morning after the storm and kind of shovel off that surface water through the rows there and mitigate that issue. But overall, you know, I know the deep mulch garden system here is working great and I feel good about it. We're adding organic matter, we're providing habitat for microbes, and the earthworm populations, since we have laid all of this mulch down, has increased dramatically. You can't dig a hole here and not just devastate earthworms. It's insane the amount of earthworms that we have throughout this whole entire system. And you know, that makes me feel good at the end of the day that we're providing space for them. They're thriving, we're building soil, and you know, that's great. We're leaving the property in better condition than when we found it. So that's awesome. Well, I think that's going to wrap up the deep mulch garden system video. If you guys have hung out for this long, I'd appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button and make sure you guys hit that bell. You guys can stay up to date on our latest videos. You know, and if you'd like to support what we're doing here on the farm, you could visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/Maple Acre Farm. Thanks guys, appreciate it.